and welcome once again to It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. I'm your host, Frank Weber. So glad that you could join me here in the forest again this week. So very appreciate that you take a little bit of time in your busy schedules to listen to the show and what I have to say, and hopefully it's enlightening and entertaining, humorous, as much as I can make it. I realize that sometimes it might be a little bit deep, but we have to have these deep discussions and work out these issues in society, or otherwise things are just going to kind of continue on a not so great path for all of us. I really believe. I like to think of my show, or your show as it were, as observational excellence with a critically thought out commentary to make sense of what I see in the world. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. I seem to get stuck in my head a lot, and sometimes the ideas that I want to pose to you they don't come out the way that I would really like them to, especially if I wake up one morning and I'm pondering what I'm going to cover in this week's show, and if I think about them too much for too long, they don't come out quite right, and I kind of get tired of thinking about them too. So, but anyway, without further ado, let's get started. I've decided this week to elaborate a little bit on the topic of curiosity, and I've done this putting off a couple of other topics that I considered discussing this week, so hopefully I can get around to them next week. Deep and fairly enlightening topics as they were. Just wondering and pondering about a lot of the stuff that's going on in our world these days, and where we're going, and can people ever come together and work together toward a common solution and a common goal anymore? I mean, I believe they can, but a lot of times it's just happening in little communities and micro communities, and there's not really a lot of big earth-shattering stuff that's going on that's really going to change the world permanently, and the kinds of things that I would really like to see in life. I'm really bothered by this. Well, I'm starting to be bothered, and I know a lot of other people are bothered by this government shutdown and how they have. First of all, it's happening because our illustrious and supposedly trusted politicians can't work together on anything and are just interested in their own agendas and not really working for the good of you and me, it appears. But I'm also very curious, and some of these curiosity topics I'm going to talk to are very broad, and they are in the national news, but then others are much more local in nature. But in any case, I don't see why more people are not curious about all of these and why they don't ask more questions. So that's why I'm talking about this, and I decided to start with this government shutdown deal. For the life of me, I can't determine why, can't understand why, or who is an essential worker. Because my wife, as you may know, is a healthcare worker in the federal government for the VA. All the healthcare workers in the government are considered essential, so they've continued to work during this time and collect a paycheck. She even told me that our health insurance is going up again, which is annoying to say the least. But then certain other workers, like air traffic controllers, and I never heard anything about TSA, but apparently the air traffic controllers, for some reason, are not considered essential workers, and then we have a lot of problems at our airports in terms of people being able to take their flights and get to where they need to go. And so there's an additional trouble there that is on top of all the other problems that I think exist with the airlines these days and air travel. And So I can't for the life of me understand why the air traffic controllers are considered non-essential enough to where they kind of haven't been showing up to work because they haven't been getting paid. Very bizarre to me. If anybody can tell me that, I would very greatly appreciate that. But it doesn't make any sense to me. You know, same thing I think is going on with our military. Didn't somebody say they weren't getting paid or something too? At least some of them. I don't really know what's going on with that, but you see that there's something very, very messed up about that in any society when you're having to ask those questions. And so I am asking you: are you curious about this? Are you asking the right questions? Are you getting mad enough about this? Because in my viewpoint, it sounds like maybe you're not. I mean, some of you listening are, but the vast majority of us don't seem to be. And then something else that happened this week, I haven't mentioned this on this show before, but there's been several months of rancor and angst coming out of New York City over their mayoral race, and it turns out that they wound up electing this guy who describes himself as a democratic socialist. I think he pronounces his name Mamdani, but a lot of people might as well call him Mad Manny, you know, if you rearrange the letters a little bit. And I know that there's like affordability issues there for sure, but there's affordability issues in a lot of places in this country right now with, you know, being able to afford real estate, for instance, and also being able to afford and survive and get basic needs and so forth with the paychecks and the work that we're receiving. I, for the life of me, though, don't understand as an American, you know, dyed-in-the-wool Texan, dyed-in-the-wool American, why people keep electing people like this who are very controversial and antithetical to traditional American way of thinking. And I don't think it was all Gen Zers or anything. I think it's just the political culture and maybe conditioning that exists in places like New York and California and Chicago in particular. I don't get it, and some of you who are living in other places other than Texas are going to say, like, well, why do you care living in Texas? And I would ask you, well, or I would say that I probably should not care living here in Texas. But the problem is, for the last, it's got to be 30 plus years now, our state politicians here have welcomed a lot of people in from these other states. And we've experienced this massive growth because our economics and our economic policies and our, community policies and just general way of doing things here seems to be better than in a lot of other places. However, I'm curious as to how sustainable that really is. You know, when the cities are very crowded and sometimes driving around them is very dangerous from people who are in a hurry and are speeding and so forth. I went back to school, university for studies, and a place that I graduated from 25 years ago, and now there's not quite twice as many students, but it's getting close to that, which is just totally unbelievable and mind-blowing to me. I don't think that growth is particularly sustainable in this state, and my brother Tom would always remind me, and I see how this is true, but Texas isn't exactly blessed with the most water in the world. And when you lose your water, towns become ghost towns and civilization dries up, and there's a real potential problem with that, and I don't know how that eventually gets worked out in the end, but if it were up to me, I would advise you not to come here unless you're really going to adopt the state's personality and the state's ways, if that makes sense. I just we can't afford to have people who vote a certain way, particularly for not necessarily traditional Democrat, which we used to have a lot of in our state politics here as well, but particularly the progressive Democrats who are probably better termed as regressive. I mean, we can't have their ways here, and I'm just curious as to why people keep voting a certain way in other places, and then things get worse for them, and then they decide to come to places like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, and I guess Arizona's still pretty good. I used to live out there as well. But it's a question people should be asking more about, and trying to find solutions for the collective. Of course, the whole Mad Manny thing in New York could be a little overblown. There's a lot of odds and ends about whether he can accomplish a lot of that stuff, and then you have guys like Bernie Sanders, who I believe were from New York originally, but then went up to Vermont and just became their senator, and he's a admitted socialist, if not necessarily a communist. But I don't know why we can't do better in this world than what it seems like we're doing. And just to, like I said, be curious and ask some questions. It doesn't even really have to be on a huge subject, but there's always things wandering around in my mind. I just thought of the quote, one of my favorite comedians, and I have a lot of them, I enjoy comedy, is Bill Engvall. And he shared a story one time about going fishing and with somebody. I can't remember the exact context, but he asked a question about how did worms acquire a taste? I just screwed that all up. How do fish acquire a taste for worms? Is the question he was asking, and it was a good question. I don't know why, because worms tend to be in the earth, fish tend to be in the water. But anyway, and I wonder kind of the same things as well. The place where I live right now here in Canyon, Texas, there seems to be a growth and expansion of a lot of burrito places for some reason. And maybe there's an additional market for that, and the owners of these places want to, bring their recipe to the community and their unique flavors and all that. And if that's the case, then I'm all for it. But then I kind of wonder, relatively speaking, are we getting more burrito places than, say, barbecue places or steak places or things that are inherently Texan, and in a lot of ways the Texas Panhandle specifically, and not to say anything again about those businesses. I had a burrito place that was next door to me when I owned my dental office, and the original owners sold it to this couple, and the couple is doing very well in their businesses. That they actually have 3 locations, 2 of which I think are now in Amarillo, just up the road, and all because of this little bitty location that was next to me before. And then there's supposedly a burrito place. Well, there is one that just opened on the way to town here and on the way to downtown, and then there's one out west on Highway 60 where a barbecue place used to be, and the owner decided that it was no longer something she wanted to do anymore, so a burrito place is apparently taking over that building now. So I can't figure it out for why that's happening, but people should ask questions and ponder these questions and wonder about them. And they may not be the biggest questions in the world, but why would you not think a little bit more about them? In this discussion here, I've also been thinking Amarillo. I believe Amarillo has a Chipotle now. It's been there for at least a couple of years. It hasn't been there that long, but we don't want to have one down here in Canyon for whatever reason. But people should ask stuff like that, and I don't get why they don't. And in lieu of all these other places that are opening, I like burritos. I like lots of different types of food. I wouldn't say that I'm not much of a cooker, but I do enjoy tasty treats and have had burritos in the past, but it's not necessarily my first choice of food, if that makes some sense to you. But I guess the last thing that I'll cover today, and this is also a minor issue in the grand scheme of things, but then how minor is it really if you really think about it, okay? So my alma mater is Texas Tech, and that's where I'm currently going to school in a master's program. The football team has been doing very well this year. Just had a huge game at home with BYU. Dominated the game. We're in the driver's seat to what seems to be what will be if we make it our first conference championship game in the Big 12, but there's still a lot of football to play, a lot of different scenarios that could play out, and maybe a college football playoff berth after that. The game went very well. Like I said, it was great weather. ESPN was there, College Game Day there, and their number one broadcasting team. The fans, apparently the atmosphere was electric. I didn't go. I'm kind of glad that I didn't go because there was just a lot of hype, and it's crazy how the ticket prices drove up on the secondary market. It was well over $300 a piece, and we're seeing some things in that program that are very pleasing to see with Tech. I think we've always been kind of mediocre and underrated and so forth in the past. But one of the things that if I had to pick one thing that I didn't really like about the game, it was that, and I'm kind of a stickler for tradition and stickler for doing certain things in a certain way. It was that we decided to wear white jerseys at home this time. And watching the game at home on TV, something seemed very cognitively dissonant for me in seeing that, seeing our field, but then somehow we're wearing these different jerseys, which, by the way, were special jerseys from Adidas. And Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City quarterback, who went to school here a few years ago, was great quarterback for us, played for some not so good teams, unfortunately, but he's a good kid, good guy, good ambassador for the university, and of course he was on hand with his wife. But the implication is that he and Adidas somehow designed these uniforms, and I'm like, I don't understand this. Why are we wearing these uniforms other than to market these uniforms for sale? Because everybody has everybody's hung up on what teams are wearing now week after week after week. And it's great for selling these uniforms, but it's not necessarily great for our brand going forward. You need to have consistency in your look all the time. Otherwise, people may be asking constantly, like, who is this playing, and what is this brand, and whatever. I said to my wife, the McDonald's arches are very iconic because they've basically been the same for decades. I don't know how far back they go exactly, but everybody knows what those arches are and that they represent McDonald's, whether you like to go to McDonald's or not. And our double T, which, by the way, the university redesigned to a flatter, our logo is the double T. The university redesigned it to a flatter logo as opposed to the one that was three-dimensional that came out 25 years ago or thereabouts when I was in school. And I'm not upset about that at all because it's a simpler traditional logo. It's a brand. And I don't understand why companies change their brand and their logo as often as they seem to. But I was very disappointed about the white jersey thing at home, and I asked, curiosity makes me wonder, like, why do we do that? We've got these great big money donors now, and I appreciate Cody Campbell and those guys who are working within a system, even though I wonder a lot of times about the system itself. But then why do we still do boneheaded things like wearing special jerseys and wearing our white jerseys while you're letting the other team wear its home jerseys? It's a little thing, and you're probably thinking I'm being too nitpicky and too complaining and all that, but these things really do have some kind of consequence down the line, and I wish people would just ponder that a little bit more and stand up for what they believe in, because this is what I believe in as somebody who's watched college football for over 40 years now. And, it all starts with a curiosity and asking a question. And if we can get to that point, then we can have the conversation and really solve all these issues. And hopefully people can get most of everything that they really want out of life if we just start doing that. And that's my conclusion to that. And I apologize if I've stuttered too much or seem to be rambling too much, but I needed to get this week's episode in. And again, just thankful for you, the listeners, and thinking all the time about how I want to keep going on this program and what I plan to do in the future. And so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. And as always, give you my calls to action. Sharing is caring. I love it when you share with anybody you come across in this world, in this life. The numbers, I don't know if they're misleading or not on here on Substack. It seems like we've had a lot of interest here the last few weeks, but then I hear about bots and the fact that they can come and listen to your show whenever they want to and inflate the numbers. And so I don't know if there's a real interest out there or if it's something else going on like bots. I don't hear a lot of comments from you, the fans, and that's kind of disappointing. I don't get a lot of comments, don't get a lot of feedback. Don't hear about a lot of things that maybe you would like me to cover and talk about in this show. But please, by all means, share this with all the people you come across in life, and hit that subscribe button. And as always, would love to hear post comments. My mind really isn't working. I guess I didn't get enough sleep last night or something, but would love to hear your comments and your direct messages, assuming you're a real person. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today and maybe do a little bit of research and look into those other topics that I was planning on discussing this week. We can talk about them next week for the next show, which will be number 85. So anyway, with that, and I want to say thank you so much for being with me on It's a Frankly Harry podcast this week, being here in the forest, and I love you. Thank you. Bye until next time.